This pixel art is aesthetic. Mobile suits are so aesthetic. Sailor Moon is extremely my aesthetic. Gudetama equals aesthetic. Wait, what the hell does that word actually mean? The channel Cuck Philosophy recently did a video about how the modern fascination with forms of retrofuturism like synthwave and vaporwave is a symptom of the bleak hopelessness of the current era. We recognize that present-day politics and economics are leading us down a doomed path of no future, so we retreat to and take comfort in the past's imagined vision of what the future could look like. Yes, I felt very seen. This argument isn't entirely wrong, but CP's conclusion is skewed by an over-reliance on the Western analytical lens.
Mark Fisher's ideas of lost futures. Frederick Jameson, ontology is a branch of philosophy that studies the nature of being. Derrida. The postmodern cultural condition. Derrida. The correlate of a future that will not arrive is a past that won't disappear. Western
thought views history as occurring on a linear path. That is to say, history is always moving forward, evolving and unfolding in new iterations that form a logical progression from one point in time to the next. The Dark Ages gave us the Renaissance, gave us the Enlightenment, right? And it's the job of philosophers and thinkers, the Western critic says, to steer the ship of history and define the terms of that progress. Whether it's the Hegelian dialectic or the great man theory, Western thought operates from this shared belief system about how history works. So in that sense, if we believe that the future and the past are concepts as immutable as the law of gravity, it's easy to make sweeping conclusions about the apparent contradictions of mining the past for visions of the future. But if we step outside of the European continental tradition, we can see that this linear notion of history is the exception, not the rule. We can also see that the interplay between past, present, and future is one of our most enduring cultural constants as Homo sapiens. Indigenous peoples in North and South America hold deeply ingrained beliefs about how humans, animals, plants, and the elemental forces of nature are all bound together in a virtuous, continuous cycle. This cycle plays out in one form, and then repeats itself in different incarnations over and over again. And the peoples of Asia gave birth to philosophical traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, and Jainism, all of which espouse similar beliefs about the cyclical nature of reality. Belief in the linear movement of history is a relatively new development, a construction that grew in influence and importance alongside the European powers that created it. So why is all this relevant? Because our modern-day love of retrofuturism has as much to do with the art and philosophy of the East as it does with the pop culture of the West. Putting it more directly, these popular retrofuturist scenes you're seeing right now, far-out starscapes and advanced metropolises slicked with rain and neon light, all owe tribute to the Japanese artistic and philosophical tradition of ukiyo-e, the floating world.
Oh yeah. Super. Astronaut. Yeah.
Ukiyo-e has its roots in 17th century Japanese art, from a movement of artists who produced paintings and woodblock prints of various subjects both fantastical and mundane. Demons and monsters, legends and folklore, and no small amount of erotica were all the subjects of ukiyo-e art. The ukiyo-e style is flat and two-dimensional, featuring crisp and bold outlines, soft watercolors, and super intricate patterns and detailing. The composition is typically limited to a single plane and is usually asymmetrical, creating interplay between both the horizontal and vertical elements. But ukiyo-e was more than just a style of painting. Like the greatest movements of art, it also expresses a unique perspective and philosophy. With the dawn of the 17th century, Japan's Sengoku Jidai, or Era of Warring States, was drawing to a close. After decades of unending civil war, the Tokugawa shogunate had successfully conquered Japan. The country's capital was moved from Kyoto to Edo, modern-day Tokyo. This led to a period of rapid economic growth in the city, which in turn spurred the popularity of Edo's pleasure districts, where patrons could enjoy kabuki theater, gambling, spoken word performances, prostitution, and pretty much any other form of entertainment and vice you could think of. The courtesans and writers of this era came up with a term to describe the scenes of pleasure, hedonism, and escape from reality you witnessed every day on the streets of Edo. Ukiyo, the floating world. And so, ukiyo-e was born as a vision of a world unmoored from the physical, where you could indulge every pleasure and lose yourself in the lights, sounds, and sensations of a bustling metropolis. Even the human form itself was fluid, ever twisting and changing, bleeding in and out of a sea of wild colors and patterns. And the floating motif is especially crucial. It's why so many ukiyo-e works feature a familiar and recurring theme. A body of water, bisected by a bridge, atop of which stand lonely and singular figures. It's a tableau of an imagined future, impossible and larger than life, yet still clearly rooted in the era in which it was made. But ukiyo-e was meant to do more than just inspire sensations of pleasure in the viewer. It contained in itself an implicit critique of this hedonism and materialism. A major theme of ukiyo-e was to confront the audience and force them to consider how the indulgences and reveries they were seeing were ultimately temporary and fleeting. The whole of the floating world will someday be washed away, as impermanent as the tides of the ocean. And the audience of the time understood that too strong of a desire for ephemeral and temporary things leads to suffering. This concept is known as dukkha, and it is both a critical pillar of Hinduism and one of Buddhism's Four Noble Truths. The unhappiness and dissatisfaction we feel in life is rooted in our attachment to the material world and in our compulsion to indulge in life's fleeting pleasures. Ukiyo-e is reality, as seen through a veil of fantasy. It is a duality that sees us retreating to a world of imagination in order to escape the grief of the present moment. Ukiyo-e finally reached Western audiences in the mid-19th century, and its influence was immediately felt in the works of artists like Degas, Monet, and Van Gogh. And depictions of this floating world have endured well into the present, appearing in some of the most beloved media of recent decades. It is the Midnight City, a nocturnal megacity shining in dazzling technicolor amid a permanent night. A place of impossibly vertiginous skyscrapers and omnipresent neon signage, where night-driving Avengers stalk the streets. The human body itself merges with machine as our very identities become subsumed by the megastructure. A place of fantasy and hedonism, where we can lose ourselves in the vision of a future that never was. This is more than just our attempts to hit the pause button on late capitalism. It is a vision of the floating world, ukiyo-e. These are no doubt scenes of intense nostalgia for the 21st century audience, owing to their connection to the pop culture of the 80s and 90s. And yet they are also something more than just a blind retreat into the past. When this retro-future aesthetic is invoked, the atmosphere created is often one of coldness, alienation, and even a kind of wistful sorrow. These aesthetic and sonic tableaus of the retro-future floating world make us feel very small and alone, insignificant in an ocean of blinding neon and faceless humanity. It's no accident that one of the signature scenes of both vaporwave and synthwave is gazing out from a rain-flecked window to behold a midnight city of East Asia. Vaporwave and synthwave contain within themselves a kind of overarching acknowledgement that this vision of the future is not enough, that there is something ephemeral and fleeting about these scenes. It is a future with no future, a dance on the ash heap of history across an infinite and sprawling expanse of cultural detritus. It is a kind of nightmare world, and yet we still find ourselves inexorably drawn back to it. We are compelled to take refuge in fantasy in order to escape the grief of reality.
We live in a time when the past is present, and the present is saturated with the past. Hauntology emerges as a crucial cultural and political alternative both to linear history and to postmodernism's permanent revival. What is mourned most keenly in hauntological records, it often seems, is the very possibility of loss. At a time of political reaction and restoration, when cultural innovation has stalled and even gone backwards, one function of hauntology is to keep insisting that there are futures beyond postmodernity's terminal time. When the present has given up on the future, we must listen for the relics of the future in the unactivated potentials of the past.
This retrofuturism of vaporwave and synthwave, like the floating world that inspired it, is a tale as old as humanity. It is the interplay between past and present, using the stories and mythologies of a previous era to understand the current one. It is not history moving neatly from one point to the next, but the wheel of existence turning once more. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, share it with a friend. See you next time.